Good evening, everyone. This is session 4 of Ignite Season 2. Today, I'm sure everybody who is watching us live will have some very pertinent questions about summer placements and final placements being answered. Today, we have our thought was to get you the people who you see on ground when the placements happen. They are the ones who come to the campus for pre-placement talks and the ones who are deeply connected with all the campuses. Plus, we wanted to have a huge panel from different segments, so different industries, banking, FMCG, e-commerce, conglomerates, or so. And we are lucky to have all 5 of them with us. Let me start introducing them one by one. The first panelist that we have is Aarti Jinkle. She heads Employer Branding and Campus Sourcing, Corporate HR at Reliance Industries Limited. She was the brainchild of the uh, the the most anticipated, one of the most anticipated competitions, the Ultimate Pitch, and she was the brain behind their Reliance Emerging Leaders program as well. Thank you, Aarti, for joining us. The next panelist, we have Kanika Gaur. She leads entry talent and employer branding at Mondelez India. She's an alumni of HMHRD Pune. The next on the panel is Kaustuv Bhattacharya. He is Assistant Vice President, EA to CEO Birla Carbon and Head Young Talent Management at Aditya Birla Group. He has close to a decade of experience. Next on the panel is Sumit Premi, Head Campus Recruitment Flipkart. He has a close to about a decade experience and has worked on, with multiple companies across consumer electronics, audit advisory, as well as IT services. The last on the panel is Ratan Meglani, who is VP Human Capital Management Division of Goldman Sachs. And he has close to about 12 years of work ex. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. First of all, I think in all the earlier sessions, there hasn't been any discussion on the HR bit or the HR specialization as such. I know this whole session is around placements. We'll get into that, but in first 5 minutes, because all these guys that we are talking about are those who are entering those B schools, majority of them. So they wouldn't have a deeper understanding of the HR function. So if Ratan, you can start and you can give them the universe of HR. It is not just hiring, it is much more than that. So if you can give them the sense of that universe, and then we'll move around to the other panels and the other questions as well.
I mean, great question to begin with. Thanks, Ankit. I think let me just take a step back and talk about the role of HR in any organization, right? I think the role of HR is obviously to recruit, and you mentioned this, in some part already. But it's as much to train, to engage, to reward, and to retain people in an organization. I think to meet the goals, there are some of the classical HR functions like recruitment, like employee relations, compensation and benefits. But I think there are also some up and coming, very interesting fields of human resources today, like diversity and inclusion, for instance, or HR infrastructure, for instance, that has to do with the information systems of so many employees working in an organization. There's also a very interesting potential of merging engineering with human resources. I think we all know the tremendous impact that engineering can make. And it's no different in human resources as well. So this field of HR engineering has a lot of potential in bringing efficiencies to people-related processes in any organization. I think to answer the other part of your question, I think it's imperative for human resources to just collaborate with business teams and really understand the business, speak the language of the business. I think to be a successful HR professional, I don't think it's an acceptable answer anymore to just say I'm a people person. I think there needs to be a lot more thought, a lot more strategic partnership that businesses today are asking for. And that's really the opportunity for human resources as a function to co-own problems and really provide solutions based on data.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Ratan. Sumit, you want to add anything in that whole universe?
Sure. Thanks, Ratan. Valuable points. Hi everybody. I understand the audience contains many of the students who would be entering into the B school. So there is a full world of ocean of jargons in front of you. I'll try not use any of the jargons. I'll try to keep it simple. To start with, HR for me, and you should be prepared for this question. Why did you choose HR? Till first year, fifth year, or I don't know how many years you worked in the organization, everybody is going to ask you, why did you choose HR? For me, HR is like salt in main course, right? What I'm trying to say is it is essential. Essential. It is very important, irrespective, and business has to have an HR function, a strong HR function. Talking about the structure, how it operates, in very layman terms, HR has verticals and it has horizontals. I'll give you examples of the roles. So we'll have HR business partners who are the verticals, who work closely with a specific business unit, which is aligned to them. Then we have horizontal functions in HR. You understand what is a horizontal. That cuts across all the businesses, all the teams. So when I say horizontal, your recruitment is there, your performance development is there, your rewards is there, your HR ops is there, your learning and development is there. So this is an entire matrix of HR functions. And the beauty of HR is you revolve and you keep on moving from one role to another, and the learning keeps on increasing. Like I said, it is just like salt. So it is very essential for us to be very strategic and be aligned to the business. We cannot think in east and businesses working in west. So that is where the alignment in business is very important. And yeah, that is how it is, and it is in a matrix. Once you join into the HR domain, especially the students who are keen to have their majors into HR, there is enough and more. I mean, you will spend a lot of years just figuring out what all can you do in HR. Yeah, so that's pretty much about it.
Sure. Okay. Kamika, can you also stress on the relationship that HRs need to have with not only the businesses, but the other stakeholders that may be in touch with you? That may be not for direct hiring, but maybe employee morale or maybe some sort of a motivation. Because in this environment that we are currently in, that is also a very, very important part of the universe.
Absolutely. And I think, just further building on to what Ratan and Sumit said, Ankit is, and this is for all of you who've, just joined in. If you think that HR is there for making rangolis and celebrating birthdays, so that's not what an HR does. And to perhaps answer Ankit's question, guys, it's very important to understand three things. If we talk about HR or people team for that matter, we here in Mondelez we call that as a people team. We don't call it as a HR team per se. But one thing is for sure, as Ratan rightly pointed out, it's very very important to focus on your stakeholders, to be as close as possible to the business. Secondly, I think, Ankit, to your question, HR is equally responsible for being a custodian of a culture of the organization. That's something which we often forget, but it's very, very important to focus on. And the third piece is, all in all, I think HR is there for unleashing the potential of its employees. It's very important to understand the potential of your employees and to bring them to that level. So that's what an HR stands for.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought towards the. I mean, when you said that you are actually not hand-holding them, but sort of aiding them towards what they eventually want to do, and that also links to the internal shifts that they can do only through HR. Aarti, coming to you, how has the current COVID scenario is changing all these characteristics? I mean, what is getting added on to the whole universe, the empathy factor, the earlier the transactional relationships have gone much deeper. What all has been changing in the HR function?
Absolutely. I think thanks for that question, Ankit, because right now I think the maximum action is happening in the HR function. And this is perhaps the best time to be an HR professional. But I'd also like to perhaps address, the first part of your question, which you had asked my co-panelists, and then get to the COVID bit. I completely second what Kanika said. I think, contrary to popular belief, HR is not a conventional function where it is about table, chair, air conditioning, rangoli, etc. Personally, through my experience, and I'm someone who got into HR more by chance than by choice. I look at this function very, very differently. Having worked in manufacturing, sales, and marketing, and then when I moved to HR, I think I have different lenses that I've seen this function from. And I truly believe, slightly differently from what Sumit said, I believe it is the heart of an organization. So salt is good for food. I think Sumit is doing a lot of cooking for sure. But I think HR is certainly the heart of an organization. And in my experience at both Tata's earlier and now Reliance, I think I've seen HR play a very key strategic partnering role to the business. And that brings me to the second part of your question as to how is it that we are dealing with this whole COVID situation. Now, more recently, Ratan sort of mentioned that as well. We've seen HR transforming into a very new age, tech-enabled analytical function. And at Reliance, especially, I think we eat, sleep, and breathe technology, even in the people function. And that, I think, has helped us in this COVID-19 situation very, very well. Quite honestly, I don't think the characteristics of an HR function are very different now in a COVID situation. We've adapted to the new normal very quickly. But there are some aspects of this function, I think, which have just got more refined, which have just been more apparent now. And employees at large are taking it a lot more seriously, even though we were doing it all along. So the first one, of course, I think is communications. Employee communications is a very core to what HR does, and transparent and periodic communication during this COVID times, I think, has certainly helped us. I'm sure most of the organizations today have a symptom checker where we are really trying to see how employees' well-being is as far as the COVID situation is concerned. And we are looking at a very proactive way of dealing with our employees and reaching out to high-risk employees than maybe a reactive approach. So emergency response is something which is also a part of an HR's responsibility in a crisis situation like COVID. Learning, and I think some of my co-panelists mentioned that earlier. Today, it's important in the whole work from home scenario. There could be roles which perhaps are not contributing as effectively, and thus it's important to upskill, and thus learning plays a very important role for HR in COVID. Well-being, I think both physical as well as mental well-being is something which HR in a lot of organizations today is driving. And another example from my own experience, I think we're looking at how can all employee processes start now becoming virtual friendly. So very recently from we conducted an internship program, which was absolutely virtual, which we'd never thought could be done virtually. So it's important to how we keep ourselves relevant, how do we keep ourselves absolutely agile and, of course, technology enabled. And that's very much today an HR function as well, and not just some AI or IT team which is going to be doing it. HR very much has to lead that way as well.
Correct. Kaustuv, I'll throw the same question at you. However, if you can also touch base on there was an article that I was reading the other day, because the environment is changing so dramatically. Companies are also looking at constant backups or the ownerships of critical functions. So though the plan B, or let's say the pipeline for, let's say, the leadership roles or the middle management roles were not thought through unless and until we know that there is a timeline when the current head gets promoted, only then we are looking at the pipeline. But nowadays, what we have seen is that HRs are looking at those pipelines more proactively rather than timely.
So thank you, Ankit. I think let's just revisit what we've covered so far. So Ratan and Sumit and Kanika very beautifully put across what HR actually is, what it does, and certainly what it is often mistaken for being. I think Aarti has also quite nicely put across the emerging trends in HR given the current situation we find ourselves in. Now, before I can answer your question on specific actionables that companies may or may not be taking, we need to evaluate where we are today. And where we are today is an unprecedented situation. The last time we saw something of this nature was in 1918 with the Spanish flu covering most of Western Europe, which decimated most of the population. It took about 2 years for them to recover 100 years ago. Things have moved ahead, but really, as much as things have changed, not that much has changed. We find ourselves at a point of economic stagnation, virtual recession. It's certainly changed the game. It's reset the board and moved pieces around drastically. It has forced companies, as you pointed out, to rethink their key people management policies and their key people insurance policies. While you're always concerned, you want to make sure your leadership team is standing and around to do the job. I think in the past, you used to think, well, what if they get struck by lightning, right? But now getting struck by lightning has become, what if they get COVID, which is a bit of a confusing position to be in, because we're seeing very encouraging recovery rates, but an unabating rate of infectivity. And no one's still quite sure what's causing fatalities, what's not causing fatalities. So do I think companies the world over today are developing backup plans for every single meaningful leadership position? Perhaps, but not any more than what they already have, right? I don't think that tomorrow, God forbid, worst case scenario, if senior management teams of most companies were to, in the highly unlikely possibility that this happens, were to contract COVID, I don't think the economy would come to any more of a standstill than it's already come to. Right? You start realizing that as you move up and up and up the ladder, the senior guys and ladies are there to take executive decisions on a few things. They aren't there to really run the shop day to day. So I don't think you're going to see too much on that front. I think what you will see is, especially with millennials, and this is something I've observed myself, asking the question, why do we need to come to an office? I'm getting all my work done between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. or 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. That works for me. I like going for a walk at 5 p.m. I like watching my shows and having an early dinner and reading a book and going to bed early. Why do I have to adhere to your norms? I think that's the bigger question. And I think that while most of us, surely in our companies, have work from home policies, this is the first time we've actually had to use them, right? Now that they're being used, a lot of myths are being shattered on what's possible and what's not possible, working from home versus working from office. I think the fallout from stuff like this is going to be much larger going forward than what we're currently giving it credit for.
Okay, all right, thanks. That brings me to the next question of employer branding. Now, I mean, I'm sure 90% of the students won't really understand this word, but what they would know is that all companies visit campuses, get in touch with them at multiple points in time. One question that I also had during my MBA was that, hey, everybody knows Reliance. Why does Reliance need to do an activity on campus? Now everybody would know Flipkart. Why do we need to do an activity, right? For other companies like Mondelez, people would know the products but may not know Mondelez, and that's why the activities are really, really required in that sense. If everybody in maybe a minute or two can define as to why for a company it is very, very critical to get into those activities or activations under employer branding, and why it is also beneficial for students to actually be engaged in those activities overall. We'll start with you, Kaustuv, and then move on to the others.
So quickly, why is employer branding important? Top of mind recall, creating a sense of association, and conveying to your potential future employees facts, snippets, anecdotes, things that they may not necessarily get from public forums and from batchmates and seniors. It's to help create a meaningful emotional connection, not intellectual connection. Students, they're all smart enough to know when they think Goldman Sachs, what comes to mind? You know, big bonuses, Bloomberg terminals, nice suits, right? When they think Flipkart, what comes to mind? Getting stuff at home. There's already a intellectual connection they have. I think the branding helps create an emotional connection. And for me, that's why it's important.
Okay, all right. Let
Kaustuv,
me come
I'll
to
take
you.
your cue on that one. I think
Sure.
suits used to be the case a while ago. It's no longer the case. It wasn't the case before we were all working from home. But I think employer branding is important for many reasons. I think it gives firms really the chance to state who they are, what they do, and more importantly, what do they stand for, and what do they not stand for. I think these are important avenues for you to present to what Costa was saying, the emotional aspect and really sharing with students who we are, what we stand for. I think case in point, right? You see today Johnson and Johnson and a host of other companies taking a stand against fairness creams and a couple of these other products that were in the market for so many years. So I think it's interesting to see how employers are branding themselves to kind of get that mind share within the student community of that they're trying to recruit.
Okay. All right. I'll come to you, Sumit.
All
Then,
right. Valuable inputs. I totally echo the sentiments and thought. I'll go 12 years back when I was doing my engineering. So the first time when I heard about any organization was in my third year. Okay. You wait for the third year to start for the placement, summer internships, and then you start digging on Google. Okay, what does this company do and all of that? Things have changed now, right? With again a lot of competition in terms of, again, there are a lot of good students and a lot of good employers outside. How do you seed the brand early into the minds of the students? You call it an early catch. How do you do that seeding exercise right from the day when they enter the campus, right? I read the question, somebody is asking about grade and all those stuff. So now the strategy has changed into targeting starting from first year. We don't wait for third year and final year students. If it is engineering, it is first till fourth, and it is B school, it is first, second. That's about it. So it is how you seed the brand and how do you seed it early. That makes the difference. And like Costa also said, it is the emotional connect. How early you do it, it is better for you. And how do you
okay.
retain, ensure the candidate retains that? That is also part of the learning. That is how there are various touch points in the entire journey of 4 years or 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Aarti, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think I'll probably try and explain it. Considering, like you said, employer branding might not be something which a lot of the audience today listening to us might understand. So let me try and help you with a simple example. So when we all go shopping, we go to a shopping mall. You have these departmental stores. Let's take say H&M or Zara, one of these, for instance. You enter that store. You have different sections. You have a men's section, a women's section, kids section. In the women's section, you'll have Indian wear, Western wear. Under Western wear, you'll have shirts and pants and skirts and scarves, all of them in different sizes, different colors. Now, just take exactly the situation to a B school. Today, that's what is happening. Each of these students actually have those many choices. You have those many organizations in all shapes and sizes with all sorts of roles coming out to you and putting them on display saying, hey guys, this is where you could perhaps be. But I think it's what really happens if we go back to that store. Now, if we go back to that store, you will have some people who will direct you to the right racks, and there'll be assistants who over there. And that's exactly what perhaps faculty or some of your seniors are doing to you on a B school today. At the same time, you will have, say, trial rooms where you can pick up what you like and go and try. You will also have some discounts, which will probably help you in making a choice to what I want to buy. You could have cashbacks on certain opportunities, which again will drive you to make some of those decisions. And I think employer branding initiatives that many organizations run are pretty much like those drivers, which help you to narrow down what you want to do. So whether it's internship opportunities or live projects, they're nothing but like trial rooms. You go ahead, experience that organization through a project, through your internship, see if that's what you like. Would you want to go and try that on? Does it suit me? Does that role seem nice? Does the culture look good? And then you make a call. Some of these PPOs that we give through the competitions that we run, whether it's the Ultimate Page or Wired or Stratos, I think each of these PPOs or opportunities to engage with the brand are nothing but, giving out discounts. You try and attract people through saying that, okay, you come and experience this. If you like it, you'll get an opportunity to work with us. So I just thought I'll simplify and give you this as an example. I hope the audience understands that these employer branding activities, which most of the organizations today run, are for the benefit of the students to experience these brands. And I'll go back to what all my co-panelists said. When we design these employer branding initiatives, they are all done with the intent to reflect what the organization is. For example, the ultimate pitch, which Ankit spoke about a little while earlier, was designed because we at Reliance believe we are entrepreneurial. We have a very entrepreneurial culture. We have ownership mindset that we propel. And we believe that ideas are no one's monopoly, right from what our founder chairman said. And that's exactly what's translated in the competition. We want students to come, ideate, pitch their ideas, and maybe the best ideas get certain, sort of attractive discounts. So that's the way that these initiatives run. At the same time, I would suggest don't be that customer who gets overwhelmed with those choices. Be the one who enjoys these options and has fun with it. That's the way you'll know your colleagues. That's the way you'll be able to interact with your batchmates. You'll know the organizations and you'll learn at the end of the day. So make the most of some of these brand initiatives that are run across those 2 years. And I think one branding initiative, which I'm sure other companies also run, are leadership sessions. I think today those are very underrated. The placement team forces students to sit for those leadership sessions, and thus it just becomes a tick mark activity. In my opinion, I think that's a wealth of knowledge. You have industry experts coming to you, speaking to you on various things, and it's a forum where you can engage. So don't, that's a quick tip, don't ignore those and treat them as a placement activity. I think we should be engaging more in those. So that's what I thought I'll share on employer branding.
Sure. Kanika, if you can actually take them through from the FMCG lens, because many companies like yours as well, people would know your brands in and out. I mean, people would know Cadbury's, they would know Five Star, but they may not know the brand behind all of that. And that is true for majority of the FMCGs as such. So for you, it is more critical to actually get into those activities and how you do it. Over to you.
Absolutely. I think I'll perhaps always try to give it a FMCG perspective. And if I were to define what an employer brand stands for, I would look at it at two angles. One is, of course, the consumer brand, which you anyway spoke about. So everyone knows what an Oreo is, what is a Bournvita, what is a Five Star, what is a Cadbury Dairy Milk. But the other aspect is the talent brand. Who are the people behind these brands? Who's running that organization? What does that organization stand for? What is the larger purpose of that organization? Is my purpose echoing with the purpose of the organization? And I think all these aspects, these are very, very important to be taken to the campuses. And employer branding initiatives, I think, are a great way to reflect those opportunities, to reflect what does an organization stands for, and then perhaps give that a choice. Should be given that as a choice to the students to basically make a choice with which organization they want to work with.
Okay, all right. And Kanika, the next thing would be that uh, all all companies go with specific profiles in mind. And there are there are segments. Let's say FMCG is known for sales and marketing. Then there is investment banking, with obviously Ratan will sort of talk about. Can each one of you also take them through the different profiles on offer from your company and overall from that industry perspective? How you sort of get them in the company once they are inside? What what trainings do you put them under so that they are put on the path to success? All those three, both the elements combined, the offers, the profiles that you currently offer, and then how you train them once they join you so that they are put on a path to success.
Sure. So I'll give the picture of Mondelez. The program here that we run, the management training program at Mondelez, is called as the I Taste program. It's basically an acronym for I take a step towards excellence. Yeah. So under this program, there are multiple profiles. So based on the specializations that these school students choose, basis that there are several profiles. For example, one is within sales and marketing. So anyone who joins as a sales and marketing management trainee within Mondelez he or she starts with a sales stint, so to say. So that's the sales stint, which is a ASM kind of a role, area sales manager. The second profile which we have to offer to the candidates is an HR profile, wherein they get to experience various facets of the HR function, and they get to experience within the management training program itself, which is a 1-year program. They get to experience business partnering, plant manufacturing. They also get to experience and be closer to the business, and they also get to experience the center of excellence roles, for example, a compensation or a talent acquisition for that matter. So that's another profile that we have on the plate. The third profile that we have is the finance profile, which is specifically for the finance enthusiasts, people who are keen to pursue a career in finance. For them, there are multiple roles. For example, you could be a category finance manager. You could be working with the treasury team within the organization. So, and similarly, you can have a role within the branch of the organization. So that's the finance portfolio. The fourth piece is supply chain, which is very important for any FMCG company. So right from offering roles within plant to supply chain or logistics to procurement. So those are some of the entry level roles that we offer to the management trainees. And fifth is the information business services, which is basically the uh, IT plus business services team, wherein we hire our management trainees for.
Okay. And what is the duration about these programs? Let's say the first stint, second stint. Is there a standard duration of these stints and the overall program, or they are based on? I mean, how much time a sort of a MP takes to go into or complete that program? A dedicated time, or it's
Um,
flexible?
See, across all FMCGs, you would realize that the first few months are totally dedicated towards experiencing multiple stints, right from the sales, wherein every management trainee is expected to be on the ground, work with a sales manager, understand what's running behind the consumer's mindset, how are the products sold. One is, of course, the sales stint. The other stints, like I said, are very function specific, and all of that gets clubbed, and it would be for about, let's say, 9 to 12 months. Somewhere between 9 to 12 months is what we keep to make all our management trainees ready and be able to take up their first roles.
Sure. Kanika, there is also a question on how the sales stints will go virtual. I mean, all the management training program, I'm assuming everybody who joins you will always be virtual, only from the sales perspective, because it has to happen on ground. I mean, when you're talking to retailer, distributors or so, have you already planned for those stints virtually? How are you planning it for the incoming batch?
Absolutely. I think it's a great question, Ankit, and I'm sure all people who are currently joined in would be curious to know about that. So, first of all, it's very important to understand that health and safety is of prime importance for us here in Mondelez, and when we are even planning our management trainee stint, I think we are cognizant of that fact very well. We are equally aware of the concerns of our management trainees, and so for that matter, anyone who's associated with them, be it their acquaintances, be it their relatives, etc. So keeping all of that in mind, I think the way that we would like to perhaps plan our management trainee stint would be to keep some virtual element in the beginning, and as things get better, we will definitely be giving them a on-field experience. But so far, the initial few beginning weeks are going to be virtual.
Okay. And another question, and that I think will be common to everybody. I'm asking Kanika, and the others can actually put that into their answers itself, is whether lateral entry is possible in these MT programs overall, outside of campuses, whether any lateral entry is possible. Kanika, if you can answer for FMCG and then for the others.
Sure. So while we have a well set up management training program which focuses majorly on picking talent directly from the institutes, there are various other roles also which exist at the entry level within an organization. And for them, those roles are open to all the aspirants and to all potential employees, who plan to apply for those roles. But I think the way a management training program is set up within any organization would rather want to focus on direct sourcing of the talent directly from the institute level, and then preparing them for future roles versus anyone who wants to apply laterally.
Okay. Thank you, Kanika. From FMCG, let's jump to e-commerce because that's the new age recruiter and new age profile. So, Sumit, if you want them to take them through the whole journey and the profiles to start with.
Sure. Thanks. Very relevant question in these times, and I see a lot of questions on similar lines wherein students are curious about stints also. Good to see that. I'll come back to your point where you said setting them up for success. Now, exactly the thing while we are designing a program that is in our back of our mind, how do we set them up for success? That is how we design the programs. Now it becomes very much important. A specific role, specific program is designed. I'll talk about the management training program, which is there. We do have a 1 year long management training program. In part of e-commerce, there's a business part to it, there's a supply chain part to it, and there's an HR part to it. So all the students who are hired as management trainees go through that 1 year of management training program. The important aspect in that 1 year is how can they learn quickly, because what we hire for a management trainee is a fungible resource. That is one. Two, we are preparing future leaders. That is the objective we have in mind when we design a management training program. How quickly can these management trainees climb the ladder and become the future leaders? So having those stints in the respective teams, a business guy would go to a sell side role or a buy side role or a customer growth role or KM roles. There are many of that. But the differentiator over here, what we do as an organization are the immersion programs. So within each stint, there is a mandatory immersion weeks. There are 3 immersion weeks which are there, which students have, MTs have to go through. The design of this is a sort of a flex learn model in which you choose your own learnings. In this particular stint, where do you want to go and learn, have a 1 week of experience, like they do in electives, right? They are habitual of that, choosing courses and then design the journey. That is the flexibility we want to give it to them while designing the programs. So there are immersions. Somebody who's a marketing hire can go for an immersion in a university relations team also. It is how they want, with their target audience somewhere come up to universities, how they can leverage that immersion. So that is one of the key differentiator, which again we always encourage them to choose and decide what is the best immersion for their student. This is on the B school side. We do have product management roles. Somebody asked about laterals. We do hire laterals directly for the product management roles. They do not go through a management trainee program, but there is a specific program for product managers in which we hire laterals. It can be the laterals from the B schools also, the lateral placement which happens. I'll just take a minute on the engineering programs also, because I see a lot of students are there from the engineering background also. For engineering also, there are different programs. Like everybody knows, a software development engineer or a data scientist are one things which every engineer is the first go-to role. But we do have programs like an associate product manager and an associate business analyst. When I go back to my engineering, I never wanted to do coding. My go-to place was I wanted to either go to the management side of that. How do we encourage those students get the right roles after their engineering? We all talk in our third year, yeah, what have we done? I've gone into this field. But there are roles for them also. We do have an ABA track, we do have an APM track, and that is a 2 year long program in which we develop these product managers, even though they are coming from an engineering background. That is how the diversity helps, and it helps the organization. It has been running pretty great as well. Yeah.
Sure. And Sumit, while you were talking about the product management, I think the people who are commenting, they are engineers. They want to know whether for product management, engineers or the people who know coding are preferred, or that job is also open to anybody? I mean, arts and science guy or a commerce guy. Is it open to anybody, or the engineers will be preferred?
No. So for my product management role, it is an associate product manager which we hire. We do not hire product managers directly. There's a 2 year of learning program in which gradually they become a product manager. And that role is open across the institute, even if you are a chemical engineer, a metallurgy engineer, because the dimension over there required is different. It is a problem solving role. A product could be any. I mean, it could be a technical product. It could be any different product. It is the mindset you look for. How do you solve a problem? How do you make life easy for a product user? Could be a technical, non-technical product. So it is pretty open to all the backgrounds, whatever exists in
Okay.
an engineering. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Amit. Kaustav, I'll come to you for general management profiles, which is again really, really sought after profiles as such. How do you train them? What stints they go through, and what's their career journey?
Sure. So let me just make sure I've understood the question because we've covered quite a broad range of subjects in this segment. You're interested in what is the journey one goes through at ABG in a general management profile as part of ABGLP. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And
Okay.
also, just in the interest of viewers, that is
Mhm.
the only profile you go and offer on campus at this point
Uh,
in time.
uh,
If there
I'll
are
come to that.
any others, please make them known.
Yes, yes. Okay. So, guys, first off, thanks for the question. It's a good question, and I think it's a very relevant question because general management has become one of those buzzwords like inner beauty. It can mean anything, so essentially it means nothing. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us who run general management programs that we take back this phrase general management, we add some specificity to it, we add some meaning and depth to it, and make it more than just a Me Too program. So ABGLP is essentially split up into three main sub-programs. One is the Leap Lead, which is our general management program. Second is FLP, which is our finance leadership program for CA rankers. And third is HRLP for folks who've done their postgraduate MBA in HR. So the kind of degree you would get from a TISS, XLRI, etc. Each one has a different stream, different path. Now, I can go on about success stories in the past or people I know, but as an ABGLP myself, I think it makes more sense for me to tell you about my own personal journey. I think that'll help you guys understand what a typical ABGLP does go through. So I joined in 2012. Back then, as today, we had a system of stints. So your first 12 months are broken up into a series of 4 stints back then, now 3 stints. So 12 by 4 or today 12 by 3. Back then it was 3 months, now it's 4 months. You're supposed to do a stint in a different business, different function. Very little choice. You just kind of give a hint to the team that I would like to do this, and if you're lucky, you land in it. If you're not, you figure it out. So we went and I did that for 12 months, and then you had a confirmation process. And I guess there were people who performed worse than me, so I was confirmed. And post that, I got an offer. My first role was with the group's central corporate strategy teams. I was with them for about 2 years. After that, I moved on to our private equity fund, which is or was a part of what is today Aditya Birla Capital. I was with them for about 2 years. Then I moved and became executive assistant to the CEO of Carbon Black. And in addition to that responsibility, about coming up on 2.5, 3 years back, I was also given the responsibility of managing my first team, which is an HR team. Now, I have zero HR experience, none. If you asked me 8 years ago if I had any desire to go into HR, I'd have probably laughed you off. But lo and behold, today I'm a portfolio head in HR with primarily most of my work ex even before ABG's finance. I was an investment banker. So I would say the programs are extremely diverse, extremely diverse. We try to make sure that in a span of 6 to 8 years, every individual has done at least 2 different roles in 2 different businesses in 2 different geographies. right? My internal target for my team is 4 to 5 years, but realistically, by the time transitions happen, movements happen, it's about 5 to 6 years. Now, if you join our HR program, things are a little different. After your first year of stints, you are sent to a plant, because if you want to learn how to deal with people, you have to learn how to deal with um, non-exempt employees. You have to learn how to deal with workers. You have to learn and fine-tune your knowledge on on labor laws, on in Factories Act, on those types of things, managing LTSs, managing strikes, right? A real firefighting. So you have a mandatory 2-year plant stint, right, for any would-be HRLPs out there. And believe it or not, I have seen the most timid of people, right? Timid, go to a plant, and after 2 years, people are scared of them. I have seen, absolutely. One of my colleagues is a very bright young lady of short stature, and she's often a plant. And you wouldn't think it by looking at her, but every single union leader will top his hat to her when she walks by. That's the kind of meaningful experience and stuff you can build over there. And finally, coming to our finance leadership program, a typical path could look like one of our actually good friend of mine is an FLP. He decided he wants to go and work in a plant and actually see how the cash moves in and out, how working capital is managed, how short-term lines of credit are managed, how suppliers are managed, how procurement's done. So he went to a plant. Turned out they were starving for talent. So even though his job description was that, he ended up doing a job that was that. So after 3 years, he came back. He was picked up by the Business Review Council, which is a team that works directly with Mr. Birla in reviewing the business performance and setting capital targets and approving capital spend, etc. Following that, today he's the head of MIS. He's all of 27, and he's the head of MIS, reporting directly to the CFO of one of our largest businesses. So that is what a career path looks like. The one thing I can promise to anyone who's going into general management, whether it's at my firm or anywhere else, keep an open mind. Take up the opportunity. Don't look at the location. Don't look at the business. Don't look at the SPU. Don't look at any of that. Look at the opportunity. If you're getting responsibility of people, if you're getting responsibility of financials to manage, and if you're getting the ability to deliver measurable, tangible targets, keep taking it and keep scaling up. And believe me, your career may not always go in a straight line. It'll zigzag across, but you'll be much richer for it. So that's my view on that. Sorry if I took too long.
No I definitely want to add to that, Ankit, if I may. I agree with Kaustuv. I think it's extremely important, especially in a time like now where location is really immaterial, right? There is impactful work happening from every single part of the world today because of the situation we're in. So just to add the finance perspective to this question, Ankit, I think in Goldman Sachs, at least, there is a need at the early stage to be very structured in one's career, really build that subject matter expertise and depth to the asset class or the sector that an individual is aligned to, whether that's investment banking or equities research or investment management. You're given firstly a sector like technology, media, or telecom, or for instance, oil and natural gas, right? So really become a subject matter expert in that sector, and that takes time, right? You are on calls with the CEOs of companies who are in these sectors, sharing their finance performances on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis, and really trying to extrapolate what does that mean to a firm like us, and how can we provide solutions to clients and advice to clients based on whatever we are seeing in the market. There's also obviously a huge amount of external environmental factors. For instance, what is the impact of oil prices on all the industries that are there right now, or Brexit, right? What that can do to different sectors, into different asset classes across geographies. So there are obviously the roles like investment banking, investment management, equities research at the business schools that we visit, but also increasingly, and our engineering presence has been increasing a lot over the last few years because we have been gravitating and really embracing engineering and technology like never before. Some of you may be aware about the Apple card that was launched. So we as Goldman Sachs partnered with Apple in launching that credit card. We've also recently launched a transaction banking business of ours, and all of this is through technology. So this means that we are very, very happy, obviously, with the engineering talent specifically we are receiving in India, and we want to continue to benefit from it. So I think those are the two major 10 trends or themes that I can pinpoint specifically from Goldman Sachs. Our commitment to business schools is just as high as it always has been, but we are also seeing a huge interest and huge gravitation towards engineering and technology because of the opportunities we see today.
Sure. While you're on that, Ratan, because I mean, is there, global stints as well when people join in your firm during the first year or first 2 years or so? Is it mandatory again, or is it flexible whether they want to take it or not?
So your training actually, I mean, up until last year at least, in the COVID situation, I don't think any New York training or any of those are on the cards. But for your first year, the training period actually happened at New York for all of our new hires across divisions that they join us, right? So there's a program called the New Banker Training, at least for our investment banking class, to really ensure we are setting them up for success as investment bankers based on the sectors that they're going to be working in. So a lot of sessions specifically on how do you present yourself to a client, how do you specifically do the research and do the background that's important to go to a client call or to go to a client meeting. And all of these and much more are the focus areas at a New York new bankers training program that used to happen. We're looking at a virtual model of it right now. I think, needless to say, given the situation we're all in, I think the important thing here is just to think about the impact. I think the equation of moving from an in-person training or in-person engagements that we do at our campuses to virtual has been the easier part of the equation. The more important question that we need to ask right now is what is the impact that we are accomplishing through the events and through the trainings that we are doing, and is it meeting the initial objectives that we set out to achieve? So that's really where our head is at right now with respect to just thinking about how do we make the most of the situation that we are all in collectively today.
All right. Thanks, Ratan. Ratan, also, if you can just switch on the lights, I think it's too dark before I
Sure,
come
give me
back.
a moment. I'll
Ratan,
just do that.
sure, sure. Aarti, we'll come back to you, and I would want you to start off with one question that we had from Abhishek, and his specific question was: Is general management profile open to all specialization? And also, if you can also uh, sort of touch base on the geo platforms. I mean, what opportunities does Reliance has to provide now when everything is going digital? Go ahead.
Yeah. JPL is the new buzzword, but thanks. So, Ankit, maybe I'll answer Abhishek's question through,
Sure.
giving an overview of the program. So, like Ratan said, for the finance vertical, there are of course roles in investment banking. Specifically for Reliance, it would become more from a treasury standpoint. I think when Sumit spoke about e-commerce and product management, that of course becomes a part of the general management space for us at Reliance. When Kanika spoke about FMCG and maybe sales and marketing, and I think some of those roles, of course, do exist for us in our oil and gas, petro retail, and Reliance retail space. At the same time, I think so it's basically like an amalgamation of everything that's got discussed in the last 10 odd minutes. And the program, of course, is pretty similar to what Kaustuv mentioned when it comes to conglomerates like Aditya Birla and similarly for Reliance. So the program that we have at Reliance is called the Reliance Emerging Leaders Program. It's RELP is what we refer to. It is essentially to create and nurture entry-level talent that we get from Premier League schools and foster their fast-track career growth into a leadership cadre that will help our leadership pipeline across the Reliance Group companies. So whether it is hydrocarbons, whether it is retail, whether it's geo platforms, media, our hospitality business, life sciences, Reliance Foundation, and the works, right? So that's the objective of the program. Now, how the program is structured today is we have 4 tracks. So while I understand, and I'd like to go back to what Kaustuv was mentioning, that we need to break this myth around general management because it shouldn't stay general for very long. And the idea is to help people find out their, calling. And thus the program has 4 tracks today. It has a general management track, which houses roles from, again, across the group, could be in terms of sales, marketing, analytics, IT, technology, your strategic groups, say, for the chairman's office. And that's the space that general management deals with. Then you have operations, which is a track that we've started not very long back, because of course, with the focus on e-commerce and new commerce for us at Reliance, we realized that we need to start having expertise in the entire supply chain domain and people who are really passionate about bridging that gap. And thus the operations track came into being, where primarily we have, say graduates from NITI and people who are very keen on operations as a background. Then we have the third track, which is, of course, finance, which will be more for people who are interested in treasury, mid-office, front office, financial planning and analysis. That's the space for finance. And of course, finally, the HR track. So these are the four tracks which we have as a part of our ELP. The program is structured in a way that in the first year, everyone undergoes stints, and those stints are 2 stints at the moment. We have 6 months each for a stint. So there are 2 stints, which of course they are doing it across different businesses, across different teams, and usually under these cohorts. Now, it's once they are in these cohorts and during the first year, so the first year is more about exposure for you to just understand what do I like, which is my area, the business that I'm liking, what kind of roles do I like, and that's what the first year does for you. Post the first year, you then get absorbed into roles which are a little more full time, and that's where the experience and the growth kicks in for a REL. So, and that's how you continue to grow within the organization. So that's largely around the program. When it comes to JPL, and I'll address that specifically, that is again a part of this particular program. So you would, of course, have roles for JPL that you will see in the future. Geo, of course, we were already doing that as a part of this program, and that will now start plugging in as well. I'll also like to address the lateral part, which I think someone had asked initially. So while this particular program for us is today run on Premier B schools, we also have some of the experienced hires from the same schools that are hired. Now, somebody would say about 5 years of experience or 6 years of experience pre-MBA also is eligible to, of course, get hired at Reliance, but that would be for specific roles. So that might not necessarily be a part of the RELP, but of course, we do open up those roles where they directly get hired, pretty similar to what Sumit mentioned for Flipkart, where say product managers are hired directly as product managers from these institutes where students have a higher work experience. So we do have an experienced campus hire program as well.
Sure. Aarti, also there were multiple questions around why companies don't come to their campuses. So I want to sort of frame it nicely to say that when we have those numbers with us, I mean, every company wants to recruit certain set of numbers. One, if you can give, I mean, let's be transparent enough as to how do we get to those numbers, and if we have to achieve, let's say, hiring for those numbers, how do we select those campuses, and why aren't we open to certain set of campuses vis-a-vis others? Maybe because of the requirement gets filled and maybe few campuses, that's why it's not. So I would want maybe 2 or 3 panelists to sort of go through it. I'll start with Aarti in terms of from the Reliance point of view as to which all campuses do you go to, maybe for different profiles, different campuses, and the why aspect as to why. Or how, if another person where you're not going, is there any other route to come into Reliance?
Sure. So I'll answer this in 2 parts, Ankit. One is what's happening as of now, as we speak, and what is the very near future. So I'll break into that. At the moment, amongst the institutes that we visit for the RELP, I think we do visit a fairly high number of institutes as compared to many of the other programs. We're almost visiting up to 20, 22 institutes for the RELP. The reason, of course, being that we believe, good talent is everywhere, and it's just a matter of kind of picking up who fits the bill as far as right talent for the organization is concerned. So one, we have a fairly large touch base as far as institutes is concerned, and that's happened over the last 3 years, where we're specifically trying to reach out to a higher number of institutes. The second being, how does this process happen, just for the benefit of the audience? Of course, there are different requirements, and every year those requirements change. And it's a consolidation that happens for the business. So for Reliance, of course, it's a little more complex, and I'm sure Kaustuv faces a similar challenge. Considering in a conglomerate where you have multiple businesses and multiple functions, that complexity is a little large. But at the same time, those numbers typically seem to be larger, and thus the pool or the batch that joins us at the end of the year is fairly large. For us, it's at the moment between 60 to 80, in a year. So that's the batch size that joins us. How do we go about identifying some of those institutes? One, of course, is relationships. So over the last so many years, we've been hiring from certain institutes. Some institutes have worked well for us. The alumni there are continuing to excel, are growing well. And as a result, it's like, I'm sure as B school students, soon you'll understand the concept of ROI, and that's what will start kicking in even to us campus hiring professionals. That's something that we need to answer. And that's why it just makes a lot more sense to have some of those. At the same time, like I said, I look at the second aspect of what we can expect in the very near future. Technology today is enabling us to reach out to far and more. So today we had to travel to certain institutes. Resources could be a constraint, and thus there is limited institutes that you visit. But technology is now enabling us to reach out to many. I can sit in the in the comfort of this particular chair and reach out to so many people, and similarly reach out to so many institutes. So if you have a very meritocratic kind of an assessment process, you can actually not limit yourself and go ahead and reach out to many more. And that's the process that very soon we intend to adopt at Reliance. And I'm sure the processes in many other organizations will start moving to that direction. So it's just about democratizing the entire process and looking at the right fit and the right talent at other places as well. So that's the process
Okay.
we adopt at Reliance.
Sure. Thanks, Aarti. Kanika, any thoughts on this from Mondelez or the FMCG industry point of view?
Sure, Ankit. So I agree to a few points which Aarti was mentioning, and of course, hiring depends from organization to organization. What is their overall hiring philosophy? What's their overall talent philosophy? Uh, Hiring numbers depend on that, and for us, for Mondelez, the focus has always been on quality more than quantity. I think that's what we've been always focusing on. Our focus is to hire the best, to hire the top talent from the institutes, and more than the campuses, the focus is on the quality and the talent. And yes, of course, I to somewhat extent, I do agree with Aarti, wherein over a couple of years there are relationships which are established with institutes, and definitely the organizations would want to leverage those relationships, and at the same time, there's some buy-in and there's some satisfaction and contentment in the way the kind of talent is being coming in from such campuses and how they are getting groomed to leadership positions. Yeah.
I can add, Ankit.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
we very
Sure.
similar to where you're in, Kanika. I think we also have smaller numbers to hire, and that's just because of the way our organization is set up. Globally, we just have 36,000 employees, and in India, we have close to about 6,000 employees. So every year, our hiring requirements are about 170 interns and full-time hires at business schools. I think though that the situation that we're in, I keep revisiting that particular aspect because it's making us rethink, and it's really making us fundamentally question what does democratization of talent really mean. And so for the last 2 years, doing off-campus engineering hiring programs, we've received up to 80,000 applications from there. We went at people from campuses we've never ever before. I think it's a step in the right direction. We are very, very keen to see how can we explore a similar kind of strategy across business schools and undergraduate schools as well. Yes, our numbers are not that high. We really think we can find those diamonds in the rough, if I may, from all of the campuses and all of the different types of schools that obviously want to apply to organizations like all of us present on this panel here today.
All right.
Ankit, I
Thanks,
can
Radha.
just add to that. If we take what's already been said, I think a couple of key themes emerge, and this is important for students, any students out there to recognize. There are certain branded institutes that employers will always give preference to. Is it fair? No. But is there a certain sense of almost guarantee that they have? Yes. Does it mean that students from these non-branded institutes could not be as good, if not better? Of course not. But what it does mean as an employer, when you go to certain institutes, you know that the individuals you're getting there have more consistently made certain decisions in their lives and more consistently gotten a series of cumulative results at various points in their lives that got them there. Now, does that mean someone who made less good decisions earlier on, but today is rectifying it and is perhaps doing extremely well at a different place, is less worthy? Absolutely not. But when you add to the fact what Ratan mentioned, our hiring numbers, if you combine all our hiring numbers, all five of us, it's still a fraction of a decimal. This is the one country where there's such a massive supply overhang, and not supply as in we need to just get these guys jobs, any kind of job. I'm talking about high quality, highly qualified, highly employable. The kind of talent that countries in the West would give their right arm for, given their population pyramid has just gotten so top heavy. But we just don't have the jobs.
Okay.
But I do
Sumit?
think
Sorry.
most of us
Good,
are
good.
trying to diversify our hiring patterns and our hunting grounds, because no one name or brand should have a monopoly on talent. Talent is talent at the end of the day.
Sumit, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I'll just not anyhow, most of the points have been covered. I'll just break this problem into two parts. One is, from where do we all hire? What are our hiring channels? One certainly would be a PPO conversion. Two would be on the on-campus hiring, which happens in January, February, or December in IITs and other campuses. Three is a very critical pool, wherein as an opportunity you can give opportunity to more talent campuses outside, which is the competitions we run, right? That is the third major pool of hiring candidates. While we understand the numbers are less, but how to give more opportunity to others, and that is where how do we select a campus? If I have to come for my next year hiring strategy, I will look into various points. Internal data points, certainly they would be a massive point. Two, if I have to open, let's say, a wired competition for B schools next year, how many campuses can I open to? That is in my hand. And where do those data points come from? Is from how these students perform. Now, there are various ranking platforms. You also keep on collating so many lists on how these students are doing. So talent is there. So again, I always say, without data, you are a person. Without data, you are just a person with opinion. So we collate all these data points from various sources, all the ranking websites, your platforms, and then we come up with a list. A list where do we want to try for the competitions. I will not risk directly going to a campus for hiring because I do not have a proof behind it. But these competitions, they are a good platform for all the campuses. Wherever they see an opportunity, they should grab it and participate and showcase their talent. That is how the brand building for a campus happens. Alumni, I always say, play a major role in an organization deciding whether we should go to that campus or this campus. So this is one hiring channel which has to be utilized more by all the student community. They should treat it as an opportunity which can take them to next level. Yeah, that is what I wanted to add.
Sure. Sure. Also, on that thought, Sumit, if we can also dive into in the current scenario, the next in line, the batch which is entering and the batch which is getting into the second year, they are all worried about the summer placements and the final placements in
Right.
terms of whether the evaluation parameters will change or not. First, the second is whether the company will come on campus or not because of various reasons or so, right? And the third aspect is that whether the timeline gets shifted or not. So I would want, I mean, each one of you in maybe 2 to 3 minutes, if you can dive on these aspects in current scenario, how, if at all, there is any changes that you're anticipating in the summers and the final placement process, both from the candidate's point of view, your point of view, and maybe the college point of view in terms of the timeline. We'll start with you, Sumit.
Sure, thanks. First of all, I would like to tell the student community not to worry. That is one. Because campus hiring is not an immediate requirement we fill and students start performing. This is a talent pipeline which we build for next year. That is how we operate when we come up with a campus strategy. How do we build a pipeline for talent? Coming on the process part of it, trust me on this, I'm sure all the co-panelists over here from last 2 months would have been working and by now would have finalized how do they carry this thing virtually. So I'm sure all five of us are pretty much prepared. If tomorrow any campus says we are okay, we are all ready with all guns blazing. It is again from the campus side also because the dynamics is different, right? We are used to treating in the slot business. There is specific time given. That dynamics have to be taken care from the campus side also. So I'm sure they are also working on how do they manage that. But I would want to reassure the student community there's nothing to worry. Timelines, if they are shifted, it is just from an operational point of view. But rest assured, all the companies I've been in touch with, all my peers, colleagues, all of them are very much prepared in getting this done virtually, be it an engineering or a B school hiring. Yeah.
Sure. Kanika, anything from the FMCG segment?
Sure, I think
From
to build on Sumit's point, I look at it as a great opportunity for the students and the student community who's coming in and joining the MBA 2020-22 batch in a way that, of course, while a lot of it is moving to the virtual platforms, I think it's equally an opportunity for students to leverage the online courses, the online platforms, and the plethora of resources that are available to equip themselves to build themselves for the future. So one is that. And a very simple example, for example, the way we used to do our pre-placement talks at the institutes, we used to have a batch of 60 70 odd people, and that's it. I think the way that we are moving virtually, I think it gives an opportunity for almost the entire college to be there on on a virtual platform and be available and take the benefit of the people who are representing that organization and equally be a part of that talk. So that's equally there. And what's interesting to see is perhaps to see how the colleges are reacting to the new normal. How are they going to shift to a virtual interview room, so to say? How are they going to conduct a virtual group discussion? So it's equally interesting to look at that and see how it shapes up.
yeah, and transparency.
Yeah.
Aarti, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting time. Quite honestly, I think while of course, all due credit to things not being very well around us, I think for the campus space and for the students who are joining these institutes, you should be very excited because you guys are actually going to be change champions in a way. I personally think, and I completely agree with what Sumit and Kanika said. This is the time which I guess all of us as campus professionals were somewhere waiting for, what we were waiting for. This is the much needed change where maybe the way we've been running this entire, campus circus in a way changes. And for the better, this could perhaps be the positive change. I mean, imagine the placement teams having now day zeros for consecutive days in a virtual environment. I think that's going to be something very exciting to see. So, the placement teams will certainly need to support, and I think we've started getting in touch with some of them to see how the entire placement process would be run this year. It's going to be very, very different. It's going to be very new, and it's going to be a refreshing change. For the organizations also, I think it's a step in the right direction. The travel that's involved is not going to be as much, and as a result, you'll have more people who will be looking forward to doing this process much more easily. At the same time, I think for the students out there who've logged in right now, you guys are literally like COVID champions. So don't worry on what's going to happen. There is certainly going to be things which you will probably be ready for, which a lot of us perhaps weren't. So don't worry on that front. Maybe a couple of things which would help all of you, and maybe you need to start working on that already, is start looking at how is it that you could be a lot more articulate when it comes to your verbal and written communication, considering your face-to-face interactions perhaps in the first year might not be as much. And that's going to help you in your classes. It's going to help you in interacting with your batchmates. It'll help you in interacting with leaders and organizations. So maybe look at that. And the second aspect is, which is very key to what anybody does in a B school, is network. So how will you look at networking in a digital way? I think that's the second thing which you perhaps need to look at. But from a process standpoint or a placement process standpoint, I think good things are going to happen. I'm very, very optimistic on that. So don't worry, you have like 5 of us and many other campus professionals who have your backs. So don't worry on that front at all.
Yeah, I mean, just great perspectives by all Aarti, Sumit, and Kanika. The one hope that I will share with all of you is that this is a conversation that all stakeholders involved in are having very proactively. I think the challenge we face here is just, can students, placement cells, deans of campuses, campus recruiters all come on the same platform to really understand what is the students' requirements and how can we work together to make those transitions from college to corporate successful. None of us like to do a 1 a.m. interview on a day zero point 0.5 slot from all of the that we recruit from, right? I think the experience here is certainly important. Ankit, your own employer branding report that you published as Dare to Compete a while ago clearly states that students are looking at the brand of the organization and the role that they'll be performing far more than just the compensation. So right now, the way that placement slots are allotted are based on compensation. And so I think this is an opportunity for all of us to move in the right direction to what Aarti mentioned. But I think there needs to be some consensus and all necessary stakeholders have a conversation about what is this change going to look like, because change can be for the better or for the worse. And that it is for the better, but this is what is going to be needed for it to be changed for the better.
So I have this interesting question, and Kaustuv, I'll let you take this. This is from the Placecom of I Am Kozhikode. What are the expectations from placement committees specifically as far as campus placements are concerned in 2020, 2021? Which will be very interesting for all the users. That's why I sort of put that.
Yep, it will. So I think it's something that was just touched upon a few seconds back, that no one enjoys these 2 a.m. Interviews. No one likes the chaos of the process. I think the best outcome we can all hope for from this, let's call it an experience we're going through, is for the process to get more streamlined, the process to get more efficient, and honestly, for the process to be more fair. Because a lot of times, like in many things in life, it's luck. You didn't have a call from someone else, so you happen to sit for a GD, you happen to get selected, and you happen to completely knock the PI out of the park. But what if you got that one other call? What if you were 30 seconds late, 30 seconds early? How many people get past the GD, but on the day off, at the point when the assessors want them, they're just stuck somewhere else, or they're stuck on the other side of campus trying to run across? I think doing it digitally just helps us to completely bypass all of this and make it as fair as possible. So my advice to any placecom for this year is really think about how you want to pitch your students, because if anyone tells you that hiring this year is going to be as much or better than last year, they're not being very honest with you. Hiring and manpower requirements go hand in hand with economic circumstances, and ours right now as a country have been better. But I think that's a great thing, because people are reevaluating. The kind of profile who would have easily gotten selected will be looked at 20 times more. We've been hiring this guy for the past 20 years. Kiya kya hai isne? Maybe we should look at a slightly different profile. The type of campuses people go to will also be looked at more closely. Hey, we've been going to these 3 campuses. What about those other 2 over there? I mean, you score 1 mark less in some test that is completely randomized, and you don't get here, you get there. Maybe we should go look at the guys over there. So I think that the greater scrutiny is a great thing. It'll result in opportunities for those who may not have had those opportunities before. And the best thing you can do as placecoms is ensure a level playing field and a transparent process, right? The worst thing that any recruiter wants to hear is you got day 0 and that's the best slot, but you find it from someone, you got day 0, oh, they gave me day -5. You didn't even know there was a day -5, right? There's not supposed to be negative days. So normalize it, guys. That'd be my advice.
Good to hear. And Ratan, to your point, I think definitely they need a common platform and pitching for Dare to Compete if we can become the common platform where
I'm sure
the
you are,
place
Ankit.
comes
I'm
to
not
it.
surprised at
I
all.
was waiting
Ankit,
for
a great
Ankit to pitch
opportunity
that
for
in.
you.
I was just waiting for
Yeah,
Ankit
yeah.
to just say ki Dare to Compete is going to be the platform. I knew
No,
that was coming.
we are getting there. I mean, you would know
I
that we've
know.
launched our own campus recruitment platform, but
Yeah.
hopefully that's my ask that hey, if Dare to Compete can work with Placecons to provide value to students as well as companies. What I'll also do is
Ankit,
very
just one second. I
quickly.
think I just like
Sure.
to add to what to specifically to the place commerce, to what Kaustuv said. So one is of course having a level playing field, having a very fair and transparent process. The other is they might want to start exploring, something like what you said. Uh, we are looking at the same set of students, fairly similar set of competencies. Requirements seem fairly similar across most of the organizations as well. And of course, what those differentials will be, we'll continue to figure out through our interview processes. But could there be a little more collaborative way of conducting placements this year, instead of all those 120, 150 companies coming down to a certain institute and conducting different processes, multiple processes, and virtually that certainly will be a challenge. Can there be a more collaborative approach which the placement teams now start coming in? And I'm sure, I mean, I'd probably like to also check with my colleagues here. I don't see that so much of a challenge when it comes to organizations. We are wanting to make life simpler for all of us. So the placement teams, on the other hand, need to be as open and collaborative as well to
Right.
perhaps work with the organizations to do the same.
Sure, perfect. Kanika, I'll go to you and I'll ask you a specific question from Vaibhav. Can you decode resume shortlist? And I'll go one by one and I'll probably be taking up questions one on one in the interest of time. Go ahead, Kanika.
All right. So, in the interest of time, I'll perhaps be crisper and quicker. So, see, resume shortlisting is a function of a lot of parameters. Of course, it does hold a bit of a relevance if we say that your past academic records are important, and at the same time, not just past academic records, but uh, uh, often companies also look at parameters like how have how has that individual done beyond academics, what are some of the activities and what are some of the extracurriculars that student has done in the past, which kind of reflects the personality that individual has, and perhaps what kind of roles that individual would want to work on, and perhaps your past performance is somewhere linked to how you would look at your future opportunities as well. So to sum it up, I would have to say that.
Sure. Ratan, to you, there is a question from Ishan. Will we have GDs replaced with maybe more innovative ideas? I'm sure not aptitude test for sure, but what would it be? Maybe a case study?
Perhaps I think there are a host of possibilities. I know of a few organizations also thinking about personality-based tests. So there's a huge array of ways that you could, possibly shortlist people on a variety of competencies as well. I think it's really going to depend on what are the roles that you're going to be recruiting for. If group discussion is essentially something that helps you filter about 50% of that group based on aspects like communication skills, innovative thinking, initiative, and so on. I still think group discussions are not the best way of assessing because you're still just observing people and how they talk and the way they communicate. If the role requires more execution and more actual work, then there's going to be a different set of tools that you may need to use to be able to assess folks. So let's see. There are definitely a host of options and opportunities that are there for the taking. But yeah, we'll have to probably wait it out and see specifically if it's aligned to the role that we're hoping to hire for and it meets the requirements that the organization has.
Okay. Sumit, there is a question on the online courses, but I would want to take one step ahead. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, there are multiple courses that everybody is going through nowadays. Everybody. I mean, now it's more of a parity rather than a uniqueness because everybody is going through the same courses. And once you get those resumes, you will get to know. One is it adding value to the resume? as such, or it is more to do with the learning?
All right. Very relevant question. It's just down to the question which was asked to Kanika, wherein how do you shortlist a CV? What all things do you see on a CV, and what all things are P0, P1, P2, and P3? I would say it is a mix of all, like Kanika very rightly mentioned. So, if you talk about on a competency structure, one would be a clearly business acumen, two would be on the personal credibility front. How do you showcase those two skills on a CV? When I talk about a business acumen, how well have you done your internships? What all projects have you undertaken? That is one. When you talk about the various courses, how much that person has gone out of the way to do those courses, right? It also is a reflection. It is an optional thing, right? Nobody's forcing courses on anybody, but it is a reflection of you as a person, how much above and beyond you are willing to go in terms of spending time and effort in learning new things. That is two. Third, definitely be the extra part, or you call it the personal credibility, on what all roles have you taken apart from your education. It gives us a bigger picture to a hiring manager who's shortlisting a CV, because they will stitch it to the things what that person would be doing in the organization. If I as an employee have to, apart from my work, have to do 10 certifications which are a mandate for my job, certainly that thing would be a tick point. Okay, this person has already done, is used to doing all of this, why not me choose this over another person? So this is all important things. I'll not say must have, but these are certainly good to have things. And specifically to the role which you are applying, if you have deep dived into that role, you would understand the relevance of it. And it is up to the recruiter to draw the line. Okay, now this is the right fit which I should interview. That is the first step of the process.
Sure. Aarti, there's a question on diversity, and I'm glad there's a question because many a times when we were interacting with students as well, there is always a perception that hey, when companies coming in, they have certain numbers in mind from the diversity factor as well. So, I mean, if you want to take this up.
So I can speak specifically for Reliance. While of course diversity and inclusion is very much a part of our focus areas, and we do look at diversity and try to be inclusive. Uh, do we have a target in mind when we look at that? No, not really. So I'll go back to like what Kanika had mentioned a while back, that for us it is quality and not just quantity, and thus putting a number to say that yes, we certainly need to have diversity of this kind of a nature. Is there a specific number that we've taken? No, that's not the case. Are we conscious about it? Yes, certainly. But then of course we'd also like to look at the quality at the same time. Having said that, I just take this diversity thing a little forward. So when we talk about at Reliance for diversity and when we do go down to institutes, our diversity is not specific only to gender. So we have in the past few years, and of course institutes will vouch for that, we do look at especially able, we also look at people from the LGBTQ community. So it's the diversity aspect for us at Reliance is fairly large, and that's something which we continue to focus on. So I'm sure the other panel members might be able to add in case they have any specific numbers that they look at. For Reliance, we don't look at a target as such.
Sure. Okay. Anybody wants to take a dig at this diversity thing, or shall we move on? Anything specific to your company?
Yeah, I think this is a two-edged sword, right? I think it's important for even business schools to look at diversity and not just in gender, to what Aarti was mentioning, to see how could business schools be inclusive for people with different type of backgrounds and skill sets. We see of late a trend of about 80 to 90% of people making it to business schools from an engineering background, which is great. And we all know the kind of talent and skills that they bring to the table. But if the question is, are you being inclusive? Is the assessment processes in some way favoring one subset over the others? That's a question that and I think more so society needs to ask themselves, because the buck can't stop with just organizations saying we need to get a gender equal, or a gender based class can come in 50% men, 50% women. While we at Goldman Sachs definitely are trying to bring in that change by getting in as many appealing to as many different types of diversity. That includes, to what Aarti was saying, people who are living with a disability, with sexual orientation, folks with an armed forces background. I think this is the time for institutes also to start having these conversations so that we can be more inclusive as an overall society and not just in hiring.
Sure. Okay. Costa, let me come to you and ask you. I mean, the last question, which I'm sure everybody of our users would want to know. So we talked about various profiles, various industries, various things, right? How does a B school student, or for that matter, undergraduate or an engineering student as well, get to know about all the opportunities that exist? So let me take an example. So they may know Flipkart right now, right? But
Yep.
they actually don't know the day-to-day working of an e-commerce or an investment
Hmm.
banking or an FMCG or a conglomerate, right? So I don't
Yep.
know at this point in time as to which profile is best suited for me, which company is
Hmm.
best suited for me, or for that matter, which industry is best suited for me, right? So
Yep.
what I should be doing maybe before my summers and before my final placements, just to ensure that I know what I don't know, broadly from all profiles, industries, and companies' point of view.
All right. Now you sound like former Vice President Dick Cheney with known unknowns and unknown unknowns. But um, what I will say is, to the best of my knowledge, this is not an easy thing to do, first. Let's recognize that. Second, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think the online forum worlds on jobs and internships are quite as rich in India as they yet should be. The kind of obsession that you see with certain professions, private equity, investment banking, equity research, management consulting, in the West, it's become almost like a cult to some extent. I mean, the cults start there, then they become religions here, right? So, if you know that you want to know more about a certain aspect, you want to know more about a certain role, my advice would be just go to message boards, go to forums, and look, even if it's about the job in the US or the UK. The point is, an analyst in mergers and acquisitions is not going to be doing anything that different in the UK versus India, right? CTC may be different, colleagues, racial background may be different, living conditions may be different, but by and large, the work's going to be quite similar. So that's one way you can start exploring what the work is like overseas in one certain role than another. Another thing you can do is just look at interviews. If there's one thing employer branding is great at, is taking the cream of the crop, dolling them up, and then making great videos about them, right? Every employer does that. So just go to any employer's YouTube channel or just search for it, interview with analyst Goldman Sachs, or interview with management consultant, or interview with a factory manager, whatever it may be, right? Interview with person who works in oil and gas. See what they talk about. See if that interests you. That can help you eliminate some things. And finally, of course, one of the best things you can do is talk to alums. If you have alumni from your campus who happen to be at one of the places you're considering to work at, talk to them. But keep one thing in mind: uh, there's nature and nurture, right? I mean, you put two identical people in the same company, but their experiences are just different by 1 degree, the outcome is going to be vastly different. So remember, any version of the truth you get from anyone, including us here today, has our salt and pepper on it, not yours. So
Absolutely.
just keep that in mind.
Sure. And before I move on to any other panel, I just want to tell all of our users. Uh, so what Kaustuv talked about, those content and stories, you'll find them on Dare to Compete for some of your brands.
Come on, Ankit.
Towards the end, I need to do that
I knew
thing.
this was a plug for something.
Ati, do
Yeah,
you want
but
to
I'll
take that
just,
question
yeah,
again?
I'll add to what Costa was saying
Yeah.
because, see, I think today there's a lot of information that's very easy to get. There's a lot of, and Ankit, you're equally to be blamed for some of that because we do have a lot of content out there. What's important is how do you really break away from that clutter and try and identify what's more relevant to you and what's going to click with you. So you need to find very smart ways of doing that. The other is you need to ask and don't assume. I think, with this whole herd mentality, which is very natural to happen in a B school. I have a senior who is from my IIT. He was hired there and he worked in so-and-so company. I'm also a fit there. So the whole me too bias, which kind of starts coming in when you speak to some of your alumni or you see how their career has, the trajectory that it's taken, might not necessarily be the right way for you. So I'm not sure if what I'm saying is going to help you directly, but I think you need to be smart today to be able to very quickly identify what really makes sense amongst all the clutter that's already there. Find out that information, be curious and ask. Don't assume things. I think today we have a lot of platforms which allow you to ask these questions, this being one of them. I think we weren't as lucky in our times to have platforms like Ignite where you could go ahead and speak to people from companies. I mean, I don't think I knew what the placement process was like at all before I joined a B school. So some of these things you should benefit from and leverage, but at the same time, keep a very open mind and don't follow someone because it's a me too syndrome. So I think be careful of that. That's just a word of advice.
Sure, sure. Sumit, you want to add something on it? And then I'll go to Ratan and Kanika.
I guess pretty much covered by Kaustuv and Aarti. Like they say, there is enough and more outside. You call it, there is enough and more gyan outside. There is an ocean of gyan. You have to see, choose, and then stack it in your mind the way you want your career to be. Because the flip side of it is, I mean, of having too much of information, what we have observed is instead of becoming more fungible talent, the student community sometimes become very specific on this is only what they want to do because of the things they have heard. That does not go well with the campus also, right? When we talk about campus, first thing is agile, adaptable, fungible talent we are looking for. If you have a particular set of mind, first day जाके मुझे product management तोड़ना है, I mean, that is, yes, there would be opportunities for that, but then there is a journey. The process is very important. And how do you stack your preferences in your mind and take that gyan? That becomes all the more.
All right. Thanks.
Just to add there, I think Kaustuv made a great point of just doing your research, going online, going on the YouTube channels of different organizations. The one caveat I will say is that you're going to hear only great things there. So try to understand the spectrum. Try to speak to somebody, an alum or whoever you want to speak to, and try to understand from them what is the worst work day for that person really look like. And then ask yourself, is that something you could possibly put yourself through? The reality may not be anywhere, between. Reality may not be on any of the extremes. It could be somewhere in between. But I think the hope here is that you try to understand what would a day-to-day life in an organization like this or in a role like this really look like, feel like. Is it going to give you overall joy? You're not going to wake up every morning with a smile on your face. You're not going to go to sleep every night with a smile on your face. But overall, it is giving you the kind of satisfaction that you hope to achieve in your career. You're going to be spending between 10 to 12 hours, maybe 14, if it's a time like COVID-19 on your work. Try to make sure you enjoy it. Try to make sure you are happy doing the work that you're doing. And that is when I think you'll understand the role of the role that job satisfaction really plays in one's career. So that's the only thing I'll add to the great points mentioned by Aarti Kaustuv already.
All right. Kanika, closing thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I think we've covered almost every point, and what's coming out really well is that we need to separate relevance from noise. So it's we have n number of sources available on the internet, and so on. So it's important to reach out to the valid and reliable sources, and what better could be other than the alumni, from the institute, other than your seniors who are going to be 1 year senior to you or perhaps 2 years senior to you, seniors who've done internships in those organizations, seniors who've spent 1 or 2 years within those organizations. I think it's important to reach out to them. And what's important, of course, was a great point which Aarti mentioned, that it's important to ask, so don't assume. And it just takes a one LinkedIn connection to reach out to somebody, but it's important to ask all those relevant questions than perhaps regretting later.
Sure. Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
So I've just been going through the live comments, and it seems that we're dealing with what I can imagine or appears to be very stressed out and concerned young men and women from across the nation. So I just have one thing to say to all of you guys. You're looking here at your screens and looking at the six of us. I can guarantee you 10 years ago, when most of us probably started our careers, each one of us was at a different point, different place, different ideas of where we'd be 10 years hence. And five of us work for very different companies, each one of which is successful in its own right, in its own domain, in its own field, world renowned in that field, right? One of us is an entrepreneur and doing extremely well, and has brought us together here. So don't really worry so much. Just take your own path, and trust me, it'll take you where you need to be. That's all. Thanks, Ankit.
Sure. Also, the last point I want to add to this is the life projects that the companies offer and the competitions that are on offer are also very, very insightful to giving you an insight into what those roles are, how you can think through those problems, the culture. We have seen, I mean, all the other sessions, they also stressed on those parameters. Before I close, this last question, I want to throw it out. And for me, it is a bit different. So would different companies prefer more collaborative process? So I think what they're sensing is, let's say ABG and Reliance, because they recruit for general management profiles. If companies are open and your selection processes are pretty much similar, can they happen at one go and then you sort of take only the interview separately? I don't know. I'm just taking this up from again a place comma. But do you think the companies will be open that ways to shorten the placement time as well? I know everybody is smiling. I'll open this to Kaustuv and Aarti for now, and then I'll come to you guys as well.
I like how Costa was pointed it to me. Honestly, I think, see, it's going to be something which the companies will, of course, have to discuss, for the reason that everyone has a slightly different, say, maybe not a deep skill set, but essentially different competencies that you might be looking at, largely which will still be similar. In a simple way, is this something which has been proposed not possible? I don't think so. I think it's possible. I mean, we are going to be using technology to perhaps look at the same bunch of students with fairly similar sets of experiences and competencies. Yes, why not? I don't see why it should not be possible. Of course, I think it's just going to require a collaborative effort, even when it comes to organizations. And of course,
Yeah.
the ball's now in your court. I'm ready to collaborate. Yeah, I think it's just going to be a little more collaboration, and certainly possible.
So I think for organizations that are both in manufacturing or with a heavy presence in manufacturing, both steeped in Indian values and tradition, I think there is certainly scope to collaborate. But I think we have to be very smart about how we collaborate, where we collaborate. For example, I believe that if, let's say, you are running a certain type of screening test, I'm running a slightly different version of screening test, and we exchange scores, right, to justify who makes our shortlist, who makes yours, and we know what 10 things you're measuring and you know what 10 things we're measuring. We're like, this guy or this girl who we selected looks like they're lacking on these 3 things we don't measure, but these are important to us. Gone. Or this person whom we rejected is scoring way higher than someone we took on 5 other things that we don't measure but are also good to have. So, back on the list. So I think similarly, even getting the chance to vet, because I won't be able to interview everyone, neither will she. But let's say after interviews, right? We actually, or after GDs, we exchange notes. This is my shortlist, who's yours? Or you picked this one, I didn't. Why? Because of this, because of that. So it could work, but it's going to be a hell of a lot of logistics going on in the background.
So I
That's
know,
why
and
she
I think it's
mentioned
worth
innovative ways.
exploring. Sorry, yeah, I think it's important to explore, because I do understand that there are quite a few IT organizations today who are doing something similar, where they do have a common test, which is given to the set of institutes, and of course then they have various sorts of cutoffs, etc. So in plain, simple words, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. It's not rocket science. Would it require a fair amount of collaboration and work from institutes as well as organizations? Yes, that would be needed. And of course, there would be variations that would need to be built in, but can certainly be looked at given the situation we are in and looking at things going online.
Sure, perfect. I'll give 30 seconds to each of the other three panelists to make their point, yes or no. If yes, I mean, Sumit, we'll go to you, then Ratan and Kanika, then
Sure.
Dr.
Like Aarti said, is it possible? Yes, certainly possible. How do we reach there? That is a long journey, and we need to deep dive over there, because there will be a lot of things which needs to be discussed. But it is certainly possible. Let's see how we sail through that journey. That is the question mark, and it will be on us on how we collaborate and how we sail that journey. But yes is an answer from my side.
All right, Ratan.
I agree with all of you. I think anything is possible. None of us thought a virtual internship would be possible, and here we are, in June of 2020, virtual internships. So certainly it's possible. I think we just need to make sure that there is an overlying um, trust between organizations. We are not trying to shortchange the other organization in the sector that we're in. We compete, but we compete for business. But when it comes for talent in a situation like this, I think we all need to put our best foot forward and the most earnest foot forward to make sure that we are making it a successful process for everybody involved, ourselves and the students and the placement committees.
All right, Kanika.
I think it could be possible, and like Aarti was mentioning that it was possible initially as well in the past. We've had a few examples, but then I think it's equally important to see are we looking at the talent with the same lens post COVID, and is there a shift in the competencies? If yes, is there a shift in way that you're looking at the talent? That needs to be checked, and would the companies be okay and comfortable to exchange notes on that? Is another factor that we need to take in care of. If that is okay, then yes, it's pretty much possible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll agree
Perfect.
with that. There are legal complications here. By the way, that question was Ishan's. Ishan is an intern from Goldman Sachs. So thank you, Ishan. Great question.
Awesome, perfect. And just on that note, so we are also trying out something very similar. I'm not sure whether that will see the light of the day or not, but eventually our thought process was to actually pool in all the skill sets required for different industries, evaluate students for all of them, and then I mean companies come and sort of shortlist. So the B schools come on a common platform and do that. But thank you so much for all five of you. It was an insightful discussion, and we have overshot the time by about 16 minutes or so. Apologies for same, but the discussions were really rich. Thank you so much, Aarti, Kanika, Ratan, Sumit, Kaustuv. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope our users enjoyed
Thank you,
our
Ankit.
conversation.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks
Ankit.
all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
co-panelists.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
the best,
Bye.
Everyone.
everybody.
Good
All
luck,
the best.
everyone.
Yeah.
Stay safe.